The whole book it just blew my brains.
I'd always be like, trauma moment, push it down, keep walking.
We went to the Famine Museum, a very romantic
Wow.
date in Ireland.
You really know how to turn up the sauce.
I know.
Hello and welcome to another episode of No Books on a Dead Planet. I created this series because I realised there were loads of books on my TBR list that I never got round to about the climate crisis because frankly, it scares the living shit out of me. I also realised that even when I did read those kinds of books, I wasn't having conversations with people in my real life about those books because I didn't know how. Like sometimes I don't think I even have the concept of what a normal conversation about the climate crisis looks like. Like, how do you talk about the end of the world? So this series, if you haven't seen any of the episodes before, is where I invite a lovely other YouTuber on and we finally get round to, because the devil is in the deadlines, reading a book about the climate crisis and talking about it. Today, we have Melanie Murphy. Oh my God, fangirl moment.
It's me.
She arrives radioing in from rural Ireland. I feel like you're my Irish correspondent.
Yeah, my microphone is on a bus, a child's toy bus. This is a very professional setup.
We've both just moved house, so our lives are in chaos, but
chaos.
That's fine.
We just had a lovely conversation about disgusting manky carpets and plaster and manky walls and
the energy crisis and lots of other grown-up boring things. We've become our parents. It's happened. Melanie, for those not in the know about you, how rude, please explain to those poor people who the hell you are and what you do on the internet.
I'm great, what I do on the internet has changed a lot over the years, as we will discover in this video. I used to make videos about why I'm no longer vegan, and today, Lena, I put that video on private. It had 1 million views, and I put it on private because I was like, I can't contribute anymore to this. I just looked at the comments and it was just like a war. So yeah, I've basically been sharing online for 8 years now, about all kinds of things: relationships, mental health, sexuality, food, eating disorder recovery, and I also love to write books. And I have a book coming out in May. And I'll do a little plug because Lena was just like, you have to plug your book when you can plug your book.
Plug it in.
And I've got a pretty cover for this book, Glass Houses, out in May, about reconnection to nature and to each other, and what happens when you're infatuated with the guy that your sister is shagging. So that's kind of me currently in a nutshell. I have a toddler. I'm just constantly trying to figure shit out and sharing it because being vulnerable online is very cathartic for me.
Relatable content. So we picked the book that we were going to read today as This is Vegan Propaganda and Other Lies the Meat Industry Tells You by Ed Winters, otherwise known as Earthling Ed on YouTube. So this is the first time in the series we're reading a book by another YouTuber, which is really exciting. Yeah. And I think what's interesting about this book is that it's kind of really, like, the way he describes veganism for him is that veganism is an ethical stance against needless animal exploitation. So while before in this series we've read We Are the Weather, which is more about the kind of climate crisis kind of aspect of veganism, this is about the climate crisis, but it's also about the ethical stance with animals, which I think it's a bit of a different kind of book. Melanie, you picked this one for us to read. Can you tell us a little bit?
I'm so
Why?
sorry.
How dare you? No, I wanted to just check in for both of us about where we are with this word veganism. And I know that you've mentioned before that you have a lot of thoughts around veganism and the intersection between that and eating disorders. So I'd love to hear a little bit of background from you. Very quickly, that you guys already know, I used to be a meat eater, quite proud about it. I was always like, I'd kill an animal with my bare hands, think that'd be funny. What's wrong with me? Who knows? Between me and my therapist, probably. Since I read We Are the Weather 2 years ago, I have given up meat completely and I'm phasing out all animal products, but I am nowhere near perfect about that. Oh, there's a video about it up here. And I had some cheese just this morning, I'll be honest. Why? Again, who can say? That's where I am with it. Where are you at with it, Melanie?
I am in a similar place, but so if I give you as a little summary, my husband is vegetarian and has been like wanting to be vegan for many years. So like his influence has rubbed off on me in recent times. I've definitely been going more toward, meat substitutes, corn. We always buy soya milk. We always opt for the vegan options in our food shopping. However, I definitely still have the odd steak, like a full-on bloody steak. I'd say every like maybe once a month, sometimes like twice a month, I'll have a meat dinner, and then the odd time I will succumb to cheese. And I've really struggled with that, but I made a video last year called Rethinking Dairy, and where I was trying like all these vegan meals and stuff like that. So I'm definitely moving more toward like more in that direction. I wouldn't consider myself vegan, but I have been definitely thinking about all that stuff more, mostly since I gave birth, and I'm still breastfeeding my toddler. So I think when like the whole thing to do it, a glass of milk just arrived in my fridge, like that, I just started thinking about dairy so much more while feeding my son.
That's interesting.
Just imagining myself being artificially inseminated and kept in a state of constant lactating, just so that other people could come and take my milk, and they would take my son away. And I was just constantly putting myself in that position and just thinking, how do we, like, how is this normal? How is this normal? But that apathy, like, it's got its claws so deep in me that, like, for years and years I have made justifications, like what you just said about I'd eat any animal. I used to say that too. I'd be like, I'd eat a cat, I'd eat a dog, we're part of the circle of life, we all eat each other, animals kill other animals. Like, I used all of those arguments all the time. And if we get right to the heart of my backstory with veganism, basically when I was younger, I had experience with a couple of different eating disorders. One kind of led into the other. And the first eating disorder I experienced, I came upon a vegan activist online, but she unfortunately was mostly focusing on the benefits of veganism for weight loss, and she herself had experienced eating disorder. So it was probably like the worst way I could have been introduced to the movement, to be honest. But yeah, I started kind of following her a lot and taking her advice, and only eating fruit and only eating vegetables, and just cutting out, like, all grains and all everything else. I went very in at the deep end with all of that. And she kind of like got people into the videos first by talking about harm to animals and whatnot, but like animals as commodity and animals being objectified and all of that kind of stuff. But then there was always this kind of insidious, like, in her videos, that like, if you are overweight, it's bad, and it's because you eat burgers, and it's because you're not a vegan, and you should be like me, look how skinny I am. And it just fed into because I was so young and had a lot of issues with my body at the time, I was very vulnerable to her messaging and the way she was going about it. And she would make these videos like with pictures of other YouTubers who were like in any way like bigger than her, and she literally spent the whole video like, I don't know why I was watching this stuff. I feel awful that I was almost even partaking by giving her views. But I cut out meat and dairy, and I became very obsessive then about like what I was eating, and it just developed into this very unhealthy fear of any food that I didn't perceive as clean and pure. And veganism, I say veganism, it became something I was hiding behind, and it became a way for me to cut out more food groups in order to cut calories, in order to become skinny. That was essentially what happened. And the vegan YouTubers came for me. And after reading this book, by the way, I listened to it on Audible because I have my son, it's just very hard for me to sit and read nowadays, so I use Audible quite a lot. But as I was listening to this book and hearing Ed, like, hearing it through audiobook as well, made it hit home so much more because he's so passionate about it. But yeah, as I was listening to it, I was kind of like, rightly so that those vegan YouTubers came for me.
Because I feel, yeah.
It was, honest to God, like it was and it wasn't, not even now some of them were very much discounting my experiences at the time, like that. I don't think that was cool. Like I feel like for like anyone who's an eating disorder survivor or they're currently in recovery, what applies to them and like their relationship with their therapist and what their therapist is telling them. Like I was being told to stop cutting out food groups and don't cut anything out, don't have any rules around food, and that was really important for me in my recovery. It was just so important at that time that I stop thinking about my diet at all and I just follow my, what is my hunger telling me to eat, and that was like a long process and journey. But the fact that they were coming for me because I was using the word vegan to describe what I had been doing. But what I was doing was I was adopting a plant-based diet for basically like health and like figure altering reasons. It wasn't veganism. Like veganism, people are vegan because they don't want animals to be exploited and raped and, just treated the way they're treated. And I couldn't separate the words plant-based and veganism at the time. We use those words interchangeably. I don't know if, do you ever use those words interchangeably yourself?
I think I try and sometimes use plant-based when I'm talking to somebody who I think will misunderstand the word vegan. And when instead of saying like I am a vegan, it's like I am trying to follow a vegan diet.
Yeah.
Right? Do you know what I mean? Like it's what I put into my body isn't who I am.
Yeah.
But it can reflect your moral. So it's interesting when because he's defining veganism as like an ethical stance against something, whereas veganism has been used as a way to perpetuate something you actually doing to yourself, which is another form of harm. And I think like with that whole like intersection between like criticism of you and this messy vegan thing, it's also like because people were talking to me about how they were worried about using plastic when it came to like tests for COVID and stuff, and I was like, so hold on, the whole point of saving the freaking planet is to make sure that humans are okay and that we live. So if there's stuff where it's like life or death and it's stuff about your health and it's stuff about whether you die, like, do you know what I mean? Like that's the whole point. Like if we can't live, there's no point. So I feel like with that as well, it's really important to recognize that when people are trying to recover from something like that, there is like an ultimate like, why are we doing this? To protect human lives, to protect life on Earth. Like then to criticize you for that, I don't know. It's so messy, isn't it?
But it's such a messy conversation because I don't know. Like while I was reading the book, I felt very much like thinking back on my past self. I was very much like I was going about this like I was the sun and everything else revolved around me, and I was like how I feel matters the most and how I and but I've just realized like even in my recovery now there has to be a way for me to not contribute to this horrible thing and for me to still be recovered. Do you know what I mean? Like now that I'm this far along, but it also brought up a lot of he brings all this stuff up as well, but it brought up a lot for me about the role of the people in power and also just like he referenced it, but they're figuring out how to like grow meat in the lab so like animals wouldn't have to be harmed and things like that. So it is like so much about our culture around food changing in a way that you're not like no one is feeling left out by not having this, or no one is having these the way he talks a lot about stuff like masculinity and the advertising around meat and it's just so ingrained in people like that to eat meat that just it carries so much that it's just nothing to do with.
I feel like the internet is this really messy place where it's like everyone's aware that there is a structured culture, and to be like to be a subculture or to like do the opposite of what other people are doing is exciting, but there is so much nuance there. And I think with me saying like, oh, I'd kill an animal with my bare hands, I think there was almost an element of like not like other girls, like tomboy thing where I was like, I'm hard, that wouldn't scare me, I'm not a pussy, like it's and like there's something weird there as well. It's that thing of just like everybody's trying to prove that they're, whereas like the essence of like veganism or the stance that a lot of vegans take is compassion. It's like being nice, like making sure you're causing as little harm as possible, whether that's physical harm or mental harm. And I think with that, when people bully each other into veganism and stuff, it can really like contradict the message, I think a little bit.
Yeah, it's like that the way a lot of people say, oh, well, if there was a child and a dog and there was a truck coming for them, you'd save the child, you know, we matter more. And his argument is that, you know, we shouldn't base our morality on what wild animals do to each other. We shouldn't base our, like, you can save the child first and also not want to kill a dog, you know what I mean? Or not want to
we're not in those extreme situations all the time.
Yeah.
In the same way, if it's like, if you had to save your child or somebody else's child, you'd probably save your own child. But given the choice, you wouldn't go out and like, do you know what I mean?
Hit the other child.
Yeah, just slap the other child. You know, that's such a weird argument that doesn't quite add up. So yeah, did you had you seen Ed's work before on the internet, previously? Because it was interesting that I've watched him quite a lot, and what's interesting about his work is that it's not aimed at me. Like, a lot of his YouTube channel is very much that kind of like Oxbridge debate me style thing. He goes into universities and he'll put like a table out and he'll be like, tell me why you're not vegan. And it's actually quite useful because he's slowly over time mastered this really like non-confrontational way of doing it, but it's definitely aimed at people who want to have a confrontation, and he kind of like brings them in and then is like, let's all calm it. And
he's very chill. I looked him up after the book, and he has the most beautiful skin as well. I was just like, oh my goodness. But he's so well spoken on it, and he really, really is well researched. Like, he's very capable at like debating anyone. It's fascinating. Like, I've not seen anyone kind of be as level-headed about it as well as him. Like, people can get very passionate in the same way if you have someone who's pro-choice and
pro-life
together debating, you know, it gets so heated so quick, because if you're pro-life, you're literally like, you're killing babies, like you're killing actual babies, and the way they view that is just it's very hard for each of those mindsets to like understand each other. So like those conversations they just run away and become, and it's the same with veganism. But he's and so like reading this book, I kind of, if you're vegan, it's just amazing to have all this information. It's so well researched. Like it was so thoroughly planned, like unreal job he did with it.
And I think it's good because it's quite impartial. And I think like what's important about when you have these conversations is finding out people's stories, because like with the pro-life, pro-choice thing, probably most people on either side have a story that they feel really strongly about that swayed them in one direction or the other. And it's the same with like veganism. It's like, you need to know people's backstories before you talk to them. You need to know why they think the way they do. But having that kind of like hard facts on the page was really useful. And there is a section at the end as well about how to talk to people about it. And he's very honest that he's like, actually, I have failed to persuade any of my family to become vegan. And I rarely have conversations with them about it because I find it mortifying. Do you know what I mean? So it's quite nice to hear that as well, that I was like, oh, Ed, the king of like debate me, it like still can't talk to his own family about it, which I thought was really interesting.
And he, even though was saying as well, like he didn't go to like a family event because he knew that they'd all be eating animal products and stuff, and about how like when you're vegan, that's what it comes down to a lot of the time. It's like, do I just want to ignore my feelings and just kind of sit there and go along with this and smile along with it, or do I stand up for what I believe in? But then everyone calls me a militant vegan and everyone acts like, oh, you're so over the top and you're being so dramatic. But he's like, but you know, explaining what is happening to these things on your plate. And it's just, the whole book it just blew my brains.
And I think there's a point there that's like, I think that the culture is moving more towards veganism, and sometimes when people ask me why I'm trying to like cut out meat and dairy products and stuff, is that I'm like, I think this is the way the world is going, so I'd like to adjust early because I don't want to shock later. Do you know what I mean? I'm just like, this is probably how it's going to go, but being somebody who's doing it early sometimes can be hard. And I don't really even consider myself somebody who's done it early, like, but it sounds like he was. And I think like having those kind of conversations where you look like you're overreacting, it's been the same with feminism when, you know, one girl can be like, that guy felt me up at a party, and everyone else is like, don't ruin the party. Like, come on, it's not. What? Just calm down.
He's only having a laugh.
Yeah, it was only one group. Like that. There's so many like instances in history where you can look back at that and be like, you all. Often the people who are leading the way are the people that look like they were overreacting at the beginning.
Yeah, it's very easy to picture a future where we're looking back at, you know, factory farming as just this devastating, embarrassing, awful point of human history, but we're still so not there. Yeah. And, you know, I brought up some of the arguments to my dad from the book, and he was just very much like, no, because even he was shocked that the book was actually in promotion of veganism based on the title. He took it literally when I told him what I was reading. It's vegan propaganda. He was like, oh, so yeah, it's about all the vegan propaganda. I was like, no, Dad. No.
But you should have just told him it was and then just let him read it. I'd be like, yep, there you go. It's going to prove all your assumptions right.
Yeah.
Eat it up. Was it what you expected, or were you surprised? Because for me, I think like it was very, very factual, and like I think some of the books that I've read around this topic have been a bit more like about the emotions and like societal stuff, but for like there was this huge section in the middle that I wasn't I was expecting it, like it'd be silly for me not to expect it, but we were both talking about how there is a very long, horrific chapter or two that is just describing what happens. And like he does make the point that he's like, you can skip these chapters. Obviously the like chickens and hens and like pigs don't get to skip it. So like maybe listen. Yeah. But then it is really, really hard to hear. So yeah, was there anything that was unexpected for you?
You know, when I sent you that picture of me crying,
yeah,
that was me for most of the book.
I know.
But the whole section about he's just very like deadpan, listing off all this stuff about like describing, you know, how they impregnate the animals and like just different things that they do. I don't want to like say too much because I know it's a lot, and I know some people are watching this video because they really don't want to read the book. But you know, and he's going into like really, really like graphic detail about some stuff, and a lot of it really genuinely shocked me. And we know, animals are killed so we can eat them, but like my brain never goes past that, and my brain it's like it just won't allow. And I've often thought, like, is that apathy? Is that I just don't care? Or like what is that? I still don't understand that. Because if it was, you know, your pet and anyone came and did that to your pet in your garden, like any of the things that they do routinely on farms and in factory farms, like it would just, you know, you'd probably go to the police. It's just happening every second of the day. And I do think a lot of this stuff as well, like you don't know it because of the advertising done with the meat and dairy industries. And like he does explain as well how like a lot of the people who are linked in with the food guidelines are very much like kind of, they're all hand in hand, and it's all, you know, a big circle jerk. But it just gobsmacked me, a lot of it. And I think I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting him to be just so, because it made it a lot more chilling, the fact that he was just reading off like, this is what happens, without his opinions really thrown in. It was just like, it was really difficult.
And I think that's a good decision from him, just to step back and not to I mean, we were listening to the audiobook, so there were points where you could hear in his voice that he was like, yep, and then they do that, and this is their argument for it, and you can tell that he does have an opinion about it, but it is quite just like cold hard facts, which I think is probably what's necessary. The part that was really interesting for me, which I know that the animals alone should be the reason to not do it, but the human impact, I think, could bring some people round to seeing what it is, because I think
pandemic bit, the bit about the viruses as well.
Yeah, the link between viruses and like how because we give animals so much antibiotics and then we eat the animals, we're actually losing our ability to react to antibiotics, which could be like a real planet-ending issue if we keep doing it. But also this thing about like employees in slaughterhouses. So a lot of the time we'll like, you know, we'll abstain from shopping at Primark, or we'll like not buy Nestle products because we're like, they're not nice to humans. But like with employees in slaughterhouses, they're often prevented from having toilet breaks. They're subjected to physical violence. They're generally purposely built in low income areas because nobody would want to work in a slaughterhouse unless they had to. So that was really horrible. There was even a part about how they've blocked off the exits so that workers can't leave, so they have to do overtime. Stuff like that was just like, and I think I wrote down some stats as well. It's like people who worked in slaughterhouses scored 70% higher than average on anxiety, 76% higher for depression. Poultry workers, 80% higher for depression, obsessive symptoms. Like people are dealing with this thing, PTSD, but also this thing that I hadn't heard of called predator-induced traumatic syndrome, which is the mental health problems you come up against when you inflict harm on others. And it's the same with it is with humans or animals. So that was just like, I don't even know how to make a joke about that at the end. I feel like,
I know.
You know what I mean? I'm like, that's horrific.
We're supposed to be being entertaining, but it's just very difficult talking about this.
Write a limerick about it. There was a young man from a slaughter. No.
But there's also there's really interesting stuff as well. Just like, you know, when he talks about, so one of the arguments, and I've regurgitated this before because I was told it from someone who had like a master's in nutrition about, you know, our brains only became the size they are because we ate meat and stuff like that. And he talks about potatoes being like a big factor in that and stuff. And it reminded me of, so my husband and I, like a couple of years ago, or well, before pre-COVID, we went to the Famine Museum, a very romantic date in Ireland.
You really know how to turn up the sauce.
Yeah, I know. Oh, I was pure wet leaving it, Lena. But basically it was there was a poster, or not like a poster, but like a plaque thing, and it was from the perspective of someone who like visited Ireland back then, and they were commenting on the glowing, healthy appearance of Irish people, of all of the like the poor Irish people, and they were saying, just going on about how like stunning their skin, and they looked so luscious and healthy, and all they ate was, what was it, like basically potatoes was 95% of what they had to eat. And it made me think of that. And like my husband proudly has said many's the time, like he has grown up on waffles, like bird's eye potato waffles, just eats them nonstop, and he eats potatoes more than any other food, and he's so healthy, it's ridiculous, and he's so strong.
Glowing skin.
Oh my goodness, yeah. It's a joke. And actually, I'd love to know, where do you stand on, say if you have your own chickens and you eat their eggs, like...
I would, but it sounds like if you got a chicken that wasn't bred in the way that we've forced them to be bred, I wouldn't get that many eggs. So the thing about the chickens that we, like, you can buy in a supermarket is they've been bred to artificially make that many eggs. Whereas it sounds like from this book that they probably give me about 4 eggs a year, which I wouldn't complain about. But it would be a big hobby investment to get 4 eggs a year. So I think I would if it was a chicken that wasn't like a wild chicken, because we also, the thing is, like, people talk about how it's like, oh, if we stop eating dairy products and having animal stuff, like these species will become extinct. They are people though. What is a person but a soul in a body? Like that, but the thing with the kinds of animals that we keep in farms is that they're not, like, they are real, but they're manufactured. They're not really what wild cows or wild chickens with. So I think I would keep a wild chicken, or like an genetically modified chicken.
Yeah, and just really enjoy your 4 eggs.
Just 4 eggs a year. It's gonna be like one cake, and if you burn the cake, then you're like, we're fucked. What a waste. I've got to wait to Q3 for another egg. So I think I would, and I think I would also like eat the body of an animal that had died naturally, but then they've probably died of something you don't want yourself. So do you know what I mean? Like, as somebody who's trying to like survive, I don't know if it'd be very sensible. So I think there are like extreme cases where that, or I'd probably be okay with it. But that said, I'm still like, I haven't completely got it out of my diet. Like, I don't drink milk anymore and stuff like that. But for me, I still haven't got past that and gone into the pastures of complete vegan. So it's an interesting one to like.
I feel like with veganism, I'm kind of the same. I'm at the same level with a lot of other things where I'm like, oh well, I've made all these changes, and but it's like I justify like, oh, I'm doing this much, so therefore, like I always look at the decisions we have made. Like we've an electric car, we used reusable nappies for ages, and now we buy these ridiculously expensive nappies that are like there's no plastic in them and stuff like that. So there's loads of things like that. But then, in other scenarios, I'm just like, if I'm buying something and it comes in plastic packaging, I'm just like, well, it's up to the company to sort this out, and not necessarily me to just not have any of these nice little pleasures. And I do have this battle in my brain all the time of like, am I just being really selfish right now, or is it bigger than me, and should I relinquish some of this to like the people who can actually make a difference in if it wasn't coming in plastic, I'd still be fucking buying it, It's just
exactly
that feeling.
And I think there's a difference there between guilt and responsibility, whereas like I feel like sometimes we're encouraged to take on the guilt, which I don't accept, but I do accept as much of the responsibility as I possibly can. Do you know what I mean? It's just that thing of like, and then also I think it's just like learning more. Like this book really helped me like understand like loads of myths that I still thought were true, even though I've read a few books on veganism now. I'm still like, oh wow, I didn't know that. And like knowing what your impact is, like sometimes it's like, does it matter where your food's traveled from, or does it matter like what it's packaged in, and like stuff like that was so interesting.
That Aviation Parrot like was so shocking to me. I couldn't wait to tell Thomas, because he has bet himself up so much. He's a pilot, and his dream for years has been to be a pilot. He spent so much money training to be a pilot, and then once he got there, he just started kind of really with his journey of like his impact on the environment and all that kind of thing. And he was like broke down one night, so upset, like, what am I doing? What have I done? Like, why did I get into this as a career and stuff? And then he'd be trying to like weigh up all of the things. He'd be like, right, I'm going to try and... He is so, about having reusable bags and reusable water bottles and everything. Like he makes his own compost. Like he does so many things, but then he's like going in and flying an airplane, and people are like, you're a hypocrite. And he just, it's really gotten to him. But then that part of the book shocked me so much about the percentage of like emissions that are
6%.
to...
So it's 6% is the transportation, is the 6% is the total percentage of like the impact that your piece of food is having, like is transport. What have I even said?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
6% of overall emissions from your meat is travel. It's where it's come from.
Yeah.
The rest of it is actually making the meat and feeding the animal. Because it's just like, say, like with fish. So apparently, for every 10 calories you get from a fish, you have to feed that fish 100 calories. So it's all the calories that we actually put into to make the meat.
Yeah, that was a big one that I think my dad has used quite a bit. He's just been like, well, how are you supposed to feed 7 billion people if you just get rid of like dairy and meat, and like that kind of thing is answered in the book. So like it's just a very, very educational read in that regard. When you might lie in bed thinking these things yourself, and almost or using these questions to like justify continuing to, because that's what I've done. So it really, really helped. And I want to buy a physical copy and highlight things, because I forget. I need constant reminders of this kind of stuff. You
need to write them on little cards, and then somebody tells something, and you're like, hold on, I'll just get my notes.
Yeah.
That's B2. Okay, here's my answer.
Drink water. Okay. All of the things I need literally constantly shoved in my face. So yeah, it's
yeah, I know what you mean, but I think it's hard when there's this expectation for you to have the same opinion for life, and that changing your opinion shows weakness. And I think that's like a job that we all have to do together, is this like allowing people to become more emotionally intelligent, so they're not as like married to their facts that they've grown up with, and it's okay to like learn. Yeah, because I remember at school being handed one of those little food wheels that was like, this is how you eat a healthy diet, and there was like a big bit for cheese, and there was a big bit for meat, and there was a bit for bread, and like that stuff goes in really at the deep back of your cortex or whatever. Like that's buried somewhere back here, and trying to dig that out and like reckon with it is like hard, because you kind of like, when you see what you eat as your identity, I think, and then
it's really, really hard as well when you've documented yourself online for a long time, you've said things, and if you say something in 2015, it's held up against you in 2022. It's like, this is what you think, this is what you said. Like, you can, and it's like you have to give people room to grow with this kind of stuff. And it just puts people off even wanting to make those positive decisions if you don't, like, just accept that, like, yeah, like, I may used to have said I'd eat a cat, but like if I'm changing my opinion on that now, like if anyone is, you should applaud it or encourage it rather than constantly like bringing up the other old stuff. Like that's why I was like, I have to put this vegan video on private. Like I don't want this to be like, if I do talk about making more decisions for buying plant-based food and stuff like that, I just, the fact that anyone would use my old arguments against me is just like too much.
Do you like feel like, because you've experienced like this world of eating disorders and that side of the internet as well, do you have any advice for people who are like, do want to read about the fact but are worried about it intersecting with their own like mental space and that kind of thing? Is there anything, because that's something that I haven't experienced in the same way you have, and I'd love to hear what you'd say to those people.
So I, like, my rule with all that kind of stuff was like, until I genuinely feel like, and some people say you're never fully recovered, and like, I don't know, there might be an element of truth in that, but I feel when I say recovered, like, I don't think about my relationship with food all day, and I just, oh, I'm hungry now, I'm gonna go and eat something. I didn't have that for so long, you know, that feeling of like just and what I'd consider a normal relationship with food. So my rule was, until I feel genuinely past this, I'm not gonna like allow myself to be consumed by food related content anywhere. So like books about food, anything like that. I actually even stopped like watching videos about food and stuff, and I've recently stopped making videos about food because I realized like what if I'm contributing to the problem for someone else. So I was going to make a video about that soon. Like, people are always like, why don't you make Food Diary Friday anymore? I loved that, and I loved making it, and a big part of it was to show eating, you know, because a lot of the videos, the food diary videos on YouTube were like, here's my acai bowl, and you know, they were all vegan and they were all eating just salad all day and this kind of thing. And I was like, my diet doesn't look like that at all, and I just wanted to share that in case other people were also feeling very intimidated by, you know, what they were seeing. But I've realized in doing that, what I was, you know, I was still providing people something to compare their own diets with, whether or not, like, I didn't want them to compare, but people naturally do that, you know, we do naturally do that, as much as you can be like, oh, please, just, this is just what I eat, you know, but people are going to watch that and go, oh, like, I was like, oh, maybe it'll give them meal ideas, or maybe it will, you know, show a new restaurant and that kind of a thing. But at the end of the day, like, I don't know who's watching my content, and there's so much wrapped up in that. But so yeah, I just wouldn't I wouldn't make this an immediate priority until you work through that stuff, because it can take time, but it is doable. And then at least you're not, like, I've definitely heard some people say that going vegan helped them with their eating disorder issues, because, you know, every meal was a vote for, you know, a change they wanted to see in the world. It wasn't about them, it was about other people. So it really depends. I think it depends on the motivation behind why you're looking into veganism. And that's what I've realized, is that, like, I think I am in a place in my life where I can entertain becoming vegan, or at least consistently moving toward that, because the motivation isn't cut out food groups, cut out calories, eat less. It's like so different. It's like very much based on what Ed talks about. It's
also about moving towards something a bit cooler. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, instead of being like restrict, take out, delete, it's like introduce, do more, like eat more food, but eat this food's really exciting. And like, look at this is
about
making food exciting
flavored
again, not sad.
Soy milk.
Oh, pass it through.
It's so good.
Yummy. But yeah, and also I think what you said at the beginning was really interesting about like you kind of feeling like a cow. I mean, that's not what you said, but like you becoming like, I guess I'm putting words in your mouth. Like when you become like a mum, like you've kind of becoming like an animal in some ways, or you're getting more in touch with that thing that's like, do I have boobs or do I have udders? And like, and like when you're not only like eating food, you're generating food for somebody else. Like that must be a bit of a weird. It's
so weird. And like, you know, there are a couple of people in my life who regularly are like, you know, he's too big for that now, and commenting about me breastfeeding, and I'm like, well, if I stop breastfeeding him, I have to start giving him cow milk from a cup, because, you know, that's what the recommendations are, that's what the guidelines are. And why is that okay? Why is it okay that we you know, essentially rape cows and take their babies away and take their milk away and like, you know, package it up and give it to our young? Well, like why is it not normal that I'm able to continue breastfeeding when that in societies where children are allowed to self-wean, they typically self-wean like as toddlers and not like when they're small babies. And you know, it's just, but there's so much wrapped up in this though, because like formula saves so many babies every year, but formula is part of this problem. And you know, there's so much, but then you don't want to, like, you know what I mean, there's the options. I remember looking into like options, like plant-based formulas when before I went into the hospital, because I wanted to have one like on hand, like just in case. And just the options were just so, even in the health food shop, the local health food shop, I was like, what? So it had this like one of like, this is some goat's milk, and it was this happy looking goat on the thing, and you just read the back and it's the same as what's in the supermarket.
So you're waiting for the world to catch up with that one, I think, because again he talks in the book about how it's like the loads of myths around parenting and veganism, and he's like, it's just not true. I don't know what to tell you. It's just not true.
But it's it really knocked me for six, like when I was kind of picturing that, because so my husband's parents live next to a farm, and there's this farm around the back, and sometimes you just hear this like mad mooing, like, and I'd be, you know, like, why are the cows being so loud? And they'd be like, so this is when they take the calves away, and the cat, they'd be like, oh, they'll quieten down. I was lying in bed, I was like, I'm never going to sleep again. I could just hear the cow just desperately looking for her calf. And you know, they literally will run after, you know, if the calves are put up into a trailer, they'll chase it's just devastating, like, because I can cry just looking at my son, just being like, oh my god, you're so perfect and amazing. And like, you know, all animals I'm sure feel that's amazing sense of bonding when their offspring is born, and just what we do to them every day is just like,
and it's weird because it's like people are like, oh, they're not human, and it's like, well, what does it mean to be human? Does it mean like is human intelligence? Because that's a bit ableist and weird. Like is being human like caring for others and like being able to feel pain and compassion and empathy? Because they feel all of that. When you think
about animal rights, you know the way people talk about animal rights, and they scoff and they roll their eyes, and they're, you know, they're like, oh, as if animals are equal to us. What, do we let them vote? And it's like, well, we don't let infants vote, because infants, you know, don't need to vote. They don't care about voting. Obviously a chicken doesn't care about voting, but obviously a chicken would rather not have their beak cut off. Like, it's just that kind of thing. Oh, this book really genuinely got to me, and I didn't think it would. I thought I was gonna be the person to come on this podcast and be like, well, you know, this was my background, and so that's why I feel this way. And I was like, oh, that might be a unique kind of position for me to offer to this, and we might debate a bit, but like I just couldn't cope.
Yeah, we were like
book.
Ready to joust, and we're like, no, we're both ruined. Like, we've been ruined. Because as well, it's really fucked with my idea of pets. And I've been thinking about this a bit, but he really went into it, this idea of like, actually, we do really care about pets. So a lot of people that would say like, it's just an animal, they don't feel anything, would literally die for their dog. Do you know what I mean? And because there's no real difference between a dog and a pig, like apart from visuals, especially when it comes to intelligence and personality and stuff, like he had this little paragraph that I did actually bother to type out from the audiobook, which means that it was good, because typing stuff out from an audiobook is a fucking
pain in the ass.
Passage to I don't even know, to Jerusalem. I realised that to gain my respect and my admiration, non-human animals need to offer me nothing in return. Yet for many of us in urban environments, the only animals we outwardly care about are the animals that have enriched our lives, such as dogs, which we have in our homes. A belief that they are worthy of moral consideration because they have formed a mutual relationship with us, which I was like, oh God. So like this kind of idea that we only care about our pets, or we only care about dogs because they're nice and they're nice to us, isn't something that we do in the rest of our moral lives. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, I don't care about people from that country because like I've heard that they're bad. Do you know what I mean? Like that's something that most of us hopefully strive to fight against. But this idea that like because dogs like appeal to our sense of self and we feel like they're serving us, then we'll protect them. But but that'll give me hope as well, is because so many people care about pets. Like it's very easy. I think it's a really easy moral jump between like knowing that if somebody killed your dog, you'd be mad.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like it's a very short cliff to jump to the next lily pad. What am I talking about? You know what I mean? Like I think it's interesting. What's going on?
Describing a level in Crash Bandicoot right now.
Yeah, literally, it's like you've just got one lily pad to go, mate, and you're full on vegan, radicalized forever. But yeah, I just think the whole concept of pets is more complicated than I first thought, and that's something I have to sit with.
Do you know what? So one of the things you messaged me about was there something that stood out to me, or something that would stay with me? And literally I've thought about this too many times. It made me so uncomfortable, and it was where he talked about the practice of stuffing calves with hay to trick the cows into thinking that it was their baby, so that they would basically like keep producing milk. Like that image, like I basically like kind of looked over this way and like just looked at my son, and my brain immediately went there, like if he was dead and someone stuffed stuff into him and was like, here I'm
keep lactating.
Oh my God, it's like it literally I was joking about it to Thomas, but like as I was joking about it, my eyes were welling up. Like it gave me such goosebumps, because that's just so fucked. Like that's so beyond fucked that that's where we're at. And like now every time I'm ever going to be like, oh, I'd love some ice cream, I'm just going to think of that, and I just will not, I will not want it, because it's just so gross. Like I just can't believe that kind of thing. And I really did buy into the kind of happy farms thing, and especially because I'm in Ireland, people would always be like, oh, our farms aren't like the US farms. And at the start of the book I was like, oh, please tell me he's not just going to keep quoting about like America, because he did mention stuff in America a lot, and I was like, oh please, like, because I need to like come at this from, I just need to know more about like the practices worldwide kind of thing. But he does then, like, he goes into, and he kind of explains how like it's pretty much the same everywhere. And I think, but you drive through Ireland and you see the animals dotted on the fields, and you're like, oh, look at them. And it's just, it's very easy to buy into that. And the marketing, like, definitely really, like, I am such a sucker for good marketing. Like, it really has shaped a lot of my views and opinions. So, but that image, man, like,
I think this idea that people are like, oh, I source my meat from local farms, like, I'd be surprised how, like, the amount of people that said that to me versus the amount of people that would actually be able to do that statistically. There's something weird going on there, because as well, like, he was saying, like, we have this idealized idea of farms, like, Tesco has like their own brand of farm that isn't a real farm. They've just made up a farm name. It's not a farm.
Sure. One of the things that I got, people came at me so hard for this before, like commenters, and it wasn't like just haters, it was like constructive criticism. But like I had said in a vlog, it was like a Christmas food diary video or something, and I was like, my dad sourced this turkey from, and because the farm that it came from was like written on the thing, and it was a, you know, free range, blah blah blah, and it was on the label. But like it was from essentially from Aldi or Lidl, like one of those places, but they packaged it to make it seem so. And my dad, when I said like sourced, I meant like my dad basically like went around all the shops and was looking for like the best, the most ethical option. And I'm saying like that with these, you know, quotey things because, you know, that was the way I was thinking about it at the time. But such bullshit, like, you know, it's
but then it's, as a consumer, like, how are you supposed to know that for yourself unless you read something like this or you watch this video? But like the things as well, like about free range. So I always buy free range eggs because I'm like, I'm just doing my bit. But like they were talking about how free range eggs, like it's kind of like another marketing ploy. Like free range means that they only live 8 weeks longer than they would normally. They only need to have access to outdoor spaces for half their life, which needs to be about 1 square meter per bird, and they're killed in exactly the same way. Like there's nothing more humane about the way they die. It's not really like they live any longer, and they don't really have that much access to the outside. It's not like they're like running around in a field, like exploring, making stories, taking names. Living their best. And I don't know as well, like it's that thing of like, oh, like you could, if you reared a child till the age of 4 and then killed them, but were like, we gave them a good life. It's kind of like Never Let Me Go. It's like, well, they completed. What can I do?
She was here for a fun time, not for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. She burnt bright. Like it's you can laugh because it's so like
it's
what's
so
happening?
Awful.
Why are humans so absolutely batty? How have we survived this long? Who can say?
Potatoes.
Yeah, potatoes. It's potatoes for everything. But yeah, I think there's one last thing I wanted to say. Oh yeah, so this thing about extremism as well, because I think one of the reasons I avoided reading this book for a very long time, so I'm glad you picked it, because I kept seeing it in Waterstones and being like, not today, Ed, not today. Was because this worry that I will come across as like an extremist in some ways. Do you know what I mean? Like, even now, like going out and eating with my friends and like asking for the vegan menu, because like that's one of my rules, is like when I eat out, I'm trying to eat vegan. You know, and trying to field those kind of questions, it's like weird because I don't want to come across like I feel something about their actions, even though I guess I must feel something about their actions because there is like, do you know what I mean? Like I can't just make decisions for myself. But then he had this line in it. They said, we see attempts at moral consistency as signs of extremism. And I was like, yes, because it's what I'm trying to do is be morally consistent, because I already have all these beliefs around like how we should treat children and people that are more vulnerable than us, and humans and animals that are more vulnerable than us. And I'm just trying to be consistent because I don't kill dogs. And I don't pay people to kill dogs. And I think it'd be weird if somebody killed a dog and served it to me. So I'm just trying to be consistent. You know, I thought that was interesting. But do you think you'd ever like go, like, do you see in your future like ever saying like, I am a vegan? Or do you think that it's more like you'll try and eat more like a plant-based diet? And do you know, I don't know, do you ever scared about identifying as a vegan?
I'm very, very, very scared of identifying as vegan because I know the way I am. If I slipped up, I'm nervous of that triggering this kind of response in me of like, because but I've fought that in so many other aspects of my life. Like I used to be very much like, you know, oh, if I'm on this workout plan, or I'm doing, you know, if I missed a week, that I would be like, oh, sure, it's all done now. Sure, I don't need to do that ever again anymore. Nope, I'm a person who doesn't exercise. But I'm not like that with any other aspect of my life now. Like I'll be like, if I don't exercise for 2 months, I'm like, well, there's no reason I can't exercise today. I have a free couple of hours. Like, you know, I feel very like I'm over that. But then with this, like, it's because veganism means so much. It's not just plant-based. It's like veganism is a way of life. It's not just a thing you're doing. That I'd be so nervous of, because for example, like I sometimes, if I go to my mother-in-law's and like they have leftover stew, say, and we've not like brought food with us, and they're like, oh, stay the night, and it's a case of like, will we order a takeaway? Or will we just, well, for me, like, I'll be like, will I eat the leftover stew that has like 2 pieces of beef in it? And I'm kind of like, in those situations, I'm nervous about having all those things of like going to other people's houses and being like, no, sorry, I can't have any of this stuff that you've made for me, or being that person who has to have the special requests and like, can you, you know, if you're going to stay with someone, like, can you make sure you have soy milk, or, you know, things like that. But then I feel like more and more people are moving that way. Like, he commented on how many more plant-based options are, like, as of 2020 in supermarkets. And I've noticed that when I go, like, I can basically find anything in vegetarian or vegan, you know, form, and it's nice, and it's not like a crappy alternative. So I really do, I would love to be vegan by the time I'm 35, 40, but then I'm nervous about ever actually saying that, you know, like, I think I would rather it be, but maybe not a label I put on myself, and not like my new, like, I'm the vegan YouTuber now. Like, I don't want to just take that on.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between practicing it in your life and becoming like an evangelical person who, you know, and it's okay to be either. I think we need both. Yeah, I'm hoping that it will be a thing where by the time I actually make it to like 100% vegan diet, it won't be weird, and I won't even have to say anything, because half the people will be, and it'll be the meat eaters who have to come and be like, oh, do you mind if I bring my burger? Sorry, just coming out as a meat eater. You know what I mean? Like, I think that maybe we'll be able to be a little bit, like, get away with it a bit, and like cross that bit where it's not as weird.
But I've noticed, like, I've had cheese like probably 3 times since I started this book, and I've noticed like myself doing that thing though where it's like I press a button and it's just cheese, it's not from an animal. And that's the thing that I'm really, really struggling with. And if anyone knows any books or any like anything that would help with that, like, it's almost like I feel like I'd need therapy to change that, because it's such an automatic response. It's like, you know, when you have like a trauma response to something and it just happens even though you don't want it to happen, like, that's what my brain does. It's like it immediately just turns the food item into a food item, and that's it, and takes away all of this stuff, even now that I know it. So that's where I'm gonna struggle big time.
It's so interesting though, because I feel exactly the same, and I think it's this weird ability that humans have, and we have to do it. Like, say if there's an emergency or a fire, a lot of people don't panic. They're just like, right, this is what I'm doing. I can't think about the fact that I'm in a fire. I just have to do this. You know, and I think it's that thing that's like, you don't want to get rid of that ability completely, but it's a scary ability that we have. And like, it's kind of terrifying that's you just like,
it's so bad.
But it helps you be more empathetic as well, because you understand why other people have that. You're like, oh, you're using that button in your head that I've got that I try not to press, but you've pressed. Okay, you know, like, you can kind of understand. So I guess, like, final question, is there anything, like, would you recommend this to somebody else, and if so, who? Would it be like anybody at all, or would you say like this is for these people specifically?
I definitely wouldn't recommend it if you're in eating disorder recovery. I know that for sure. I wouldn't have been able for this years ago. And I think as well, like, I think you have to have some level of openness to this lifestyle, and to it's just when you're in that mindset where you're like very closed off and you're like, no, my way is the right way, my way is the only way. Like, when you're in that mindset, it's just this stuff that it doesn't penetrate very well, and you might just start it and just turn it off and just not want to hear it. But like, if you ever find yourself, you know, thinking, oh, I'm going to buy a secondhand outfit instead of going to making those decisions in your life at all for the planet, or I think, like, he didn't talk too much really about the health, I suppose, of it. Like, he did say he felt healthier, and it is, he went through some of the science on like why it is healthier. But I think all the other reasons are better, you know, for going for this than like the health reason. You know, he talks about like that it is possible to eat an unhealthy vegan diet as well, and that with like vitamin B12, like, they give the B12 supplement to the animals, and like everyone needs a
and
B12
protein supplements as well. It's like, what?
I know. So it's just like a lot of those arguments are like debunked so well in this book. But yeah, like, I think all of the other, like, the impact on the environment and the impact on other people, as you were talking about earlier, the people who are like in these industries, those reasons, I don't know, like, they definitely even above the animal welfare, like I think those reasons, like so you could read it and read some of it and still like let that absorb, but yeah, I know for sure that there's a lot of people, if I recommended this, they wouldn't read it. I know for sure, because they're not ready, or because they're dealing with their own issues, and it's just, yeah, it's a lot to listen to.
I think I'd recommend it for somebody who has a grasp on some of the arguments and wants to enact it in their own life, but doesn't understand all of the arguments and doesn't understand how to counteract other people's, like, well, actually this. I think it's like a good handbook to, it's got like every argument you could possibly have against veganism with some facts underneath it that are very well referenced and researched. So I think it's good to like have it on hand as like a kind of... I read another book that was kind of similar called How to Go Vegan, that was by Veganuary, who run Veganuary, and that has very similar facts in it. I think some of them were coming up again for me. So I think like there's stuff like that you can read without it being this book, but I think it's good to have that like basic understanding of why you're doing it, because just like ready to draw them. People ask, like, facts. So yeah. And I think also like it's good because it's very straightforward and factual, but if that's something that you struggle with, like you might want to go for something a bit more emotive first, like Weird the Weather or something, if you need like the kind of emotional stuff before you get into the like the percentages. Then it depends on your personality, I think, because it's
like a school book almost. Yeah, it is. It was very, very, there was so much to take in, and for that reason I was kind of like annoyed that I wasn't reading the physical book, because I really wanted to have like all my sticky tabs on the go. But yeah, I was just like had the notes app open on my phone. I was like furiously typing, like, oh god, but
I think I definitely, like, even if you don't read the book, I'd recommend like Ed's videos, because I think they can be a really interesting study in like how to have a productive argument as well, like this very good like psychological stuff that he opens up to and stuff. I don't know, it's really interesting to see him debate people. It's not something that I'd be interested in doing myself. I can't imagine like going to a university campus and like setting up a little table and being like, let's go.
Oh god,
like, it takes a certain kind of person, doesn't it? But anyway, thank you so much for reading this book with me, Melanie.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this, like, the fact that I feel like, well, I hated you at first. I was like, why am I doing this? But now I feel like this, genuinely, I think it's like, it was like the spark under my bum that I needed, and I think it's the almost like final nail in the coffin that I've been like, this has been a bit of a process for me, and this is like the last, it was a big deal for me, and I am going to force my husband to read it so that maybe he will attempt all this with me, because I do think Ed talks about that in the video, like it's difficult when other people around you in your family like aren't living the same lifestyle. And I think if we were like a household where all of our shopping was, we were both having the same meals and all that kind of stuff, it would just make things so much easier. So that's another thing, like, yeah, if you can have like a vegan buddy or a vegan family member to kind of like latch onto and just be like, what do you cook, and how, like, what do you have,
whack it on a long car journey and just force them to like,
oh god.
But I think for me, it's like when I've like worried about changing certain aspects of my life to try and align it with my values, I've worried that it's going to be really stressful. And it has been in some ways, but I think in a lot of other ways it's actually been really relaxing, because I feel like on some level, when you know that stuff is happening, it does affect you subconsciously. And like when I used to walk past butcher shops where they like hang up the cows, I'd always be like, oh, trauma moment, oh, push it down, keep walking, and I think there's lots of stuff that there's part of my life that I just hadn't reckoned with, and it was secretly stressing me out, and to sort that out and to live in a way that's a bit more like logical. It's not even like, oh, I'm so holier than thou, like, great, cleansed my aura, it's so much better than you. It's more just like, this is a more logical way to live. This makes more sense.
Yes.
It is, for me, it's actually, like, maybe not relaxing is a strong word, but it's made me a little bit calmer and more, like, I just feel like
such a good point. It's such a good point, because that must build up in us somewhere. And just like, I remember someone saying about like the stress and the anxiety in the animals, and like that somehow that passing to you and stuff like that. Like, there's something to be said about that. And before I go, I will just say that one of the protagonists of this book is vegan, and she was
Vegan
very much like, but she's so vegan that she's like, she doesn't even want to put her very unwell cat down, because she's like, you know, you don't put old people down when they get sick and frail, and so she's like hardcore that way.
Oh wow, fascinating.
But this was a really good conversation.
I'm so excited to read it, and I bloody loved your first book. As you know, I'm a massive fan, so can't wait to read it.
You were so sweet about that. You're such a legend. And this was a great conversation. I love this series, and everyone better give you a thumbs up and chat to us down below about all of this and where you're at with it.
Yeah, I love it. You're like doing it for me. You're like, subscribe, smash that like button, give up me. I'm like, yes, go. This is the real professional at work here, people. That's how it's done. Oh, well, thank you so much for joining me, and do check out Melanie's videos if you haven't, which I'd be surprised if you hadn't, but you can try. But yeah, thanks for watching, everybody, and there's more videos from this series here if you want to watch it. And this video is made possible by the Gumption Club, who tip me per video to make sure these videos keep happening. Frog slug out.